What made you want to become a composer?
Firstly, it was because I was very interested in music. When I was very young, I would go to the piano and I would open piano books. And you know, they always have like a picture in there. And I'd go, there's a picture of a train, and so I thought I was making music, like the train. So that's where I started, and I wanted to always do this. But of course, I'm sure the sounds that I was making then probably didn't sound much like music. It was probably just me going, I was 3 years old or 4 years old. So I've always, I guess what I'm saying is I've always been interested and always wanted to. So at school, I would learn the music I wanted to do on piano or on drums, but I always wanted to make up other stuff. It's a bit like, you know, when you cook and you make, say, chocolate chip cookies, and you go, well, what if I put little bits of raspberry in it as well? I wonder what that's like. And that's what I did with music. So I always wanted to get what I learnt and take it one step further and maybe add something else with it. And I've always just wanted to do that. And hearing music, you know, as I'd hear it on the radio, or my parents' record player would make me wonder and dream about those sounds, and they would always, when I'd hear that music, I would imagine something. And so I thought, when I had other imaginings, when I wasn't listening to music, I'd say, well, how could I make those imaginings into music? That's what I wanted to do. And so what then happened was I went to school like you and learnt an instrument from my music teachers, and went on to high school and kept going. And then when I got to university, I actually learnt from composers, and I played a lot as a musician, playing pieces that composers had written. And I talked to them and try and understand, how did they come up with this? What was the dream? What did they think about? And so I've always loved working with those people and got inspired. So when I'd hear a composer talk or hear their music, I go, oh wow, how interesting, a great way to think, a great way to put music together. And I'm going to try that. I like it. I'm going to try it. And I wrote some really awful pieces. And over those awful pieces, you kind of work out what you did wrong and then how to make it better. And so that's how I became a composer, and I feel like I'm always learning every day about how to write music.
How do you start composing a piece of music?
How do I start composing? It depends on the piece of music, and it's different. So in the Zeeko songs that you've heard, for instance, the first one, which is the butterfly effect, I wanted to write a song about air. So I just started thinking about, well, what kind of things use air? And our voices, obviously, because we breathe. And also something simple like singing ah, and breathing, such a beautiful thing to do. It feels good, it makes us feel good. And singing is the same, so I wanted this kind of thing. And then I did some research. I thought, well, I knew that most of the air comes from rainforests, and so I started looking at communities that lived in different rainforests, and I found this community called the Mbuti Pygmies. They're little people. They're not very tall, but they live in and move around in these rainforests, and they have this beautiful sort of music that they make where they use a little bamboo flute. It's got one note, and they blow it and then sing other notes. And I borrowed that from them, but did it on a bottle, because that's something we can find. In the rainforest, they find bamboo, but I thought, what can we find? Well, bottles. You see them all around you. So I started with that, and then also listened to a lot of African pop music. I love that kind of music anyway, so listened to a lot of it and put that together. And then I wrote words, and I thought, what are all the things that use air? So I thought about insects' wings, move air, baby's breath, flags flapping, bubbles, and just used all these images and imagined the song as a kind of, you've ever looked in you probably don't these days, but when I grew up, you could look in a photo album. You know, you have all your photos laid out. Now you probably do it on a computer and you can see all your photos.
Still have photo albums.
Yep, you still have photo albums. So it's a little bit like each line of the song is like a little snapshot. I'm imagining there's a snapshot, a baby's breath, or an insect. All these things that use air. And the idea also behind it was there's this old story that when a butterfly flaps its wings, the air moves, and that might be in South America, the air could keep moving until it produces a storm in Japan. So it was this idea about little things growing into something big. I could go through every song. What's another one with the golden frog? It was the story. When I heard of that story and I saw images of these little golden frogs waving, I thought that is the coolest thing. And of course I was very interested in nature and our environment and all these things in music. And when I was your age, I spent a lot of time in the bush. And I enjoyed that very much and wanted my music to have that feeling, remember that kind of feeling. And so with that one, I was really thinking about those frogs and how beautiful they are, the rhythm of how they move, and also the music that comes from their area in Costa Rica. Like I was saying, in that area, children your age learn many amazing rhythms that they'll play on instruments that they just find. So they might play on a plastic bucket, they might play on a tin, they might play on an upturned boat. And so they're really, really using their ingenuity to create music. They didn't need to purchase a very expensive instrument. They sang and played these drums. So I wanted to get that feeling and that story. The other piece, Deepest Blue, was about that journey and islands. And islands having different types of feeling. You know, in Iceland it's cold and harsh, so I wanted music that sounded cold and hard. And then in Madagascar, which is in a warm place near Africa, which is a very interesting island because there are animals and plants there that you find nowhere else. It's a lot like Australia. So it's a very unique place. And then, of course, an island in the Pacific. And I imagine that often, you know, we travel in planes over the ocean or even in boats on top, but we never, how often do we get to travel through the ocean? And I have a daughter who's about your age, and when she was younger, I watched that movie Finding Nemo, and I loved it. And I loved the way that fish would go on this amazing journey. So I wanted a song or a piece of music that just in sound and in what we sang told us that journey or had us feeling of this cold place, this warm place. And I also looked to the different places. What type of music do they use in Iceland? What's it sound like? What does the real music in Madagascar sound like? They have a kind of dance music, and I wanted to use that. What's the kind of music they use in the Pacific Islands? And I used those rhythms and put them all together to create Deepest Blue. So it's very different, and it's different for every piece. And sometimes I can't make it happen. Sometimes it's just luck. The story about the frog, I wasn't even thinking about the frog. Someone handed me a book, and I was reading this book, and there was this story. Right at the time when I was looking to write a song. So it's just this incredible luck.
Why did you choose the particular instruments for your songs?
The particular instruments, firstly, it was what we play. We work together as a group and we love playing together. And so each of us have a specialty. So Jess Green plays the electric guitar, so I was going to use that. And Jess Champa, who plays the bass, but is also a great percussionist. And I love playing the drum set. That was the first instrument I learnt, even though I play a lot of percussion. So I thought I'm going to have that. Then we'll add other instruments, and I wanted to add instruments that came from the environment or made us really think about or hear the environment. So that waterphone that Jess uses to create the whale, I thought, well, add that in because I want to hear the sound of what it sounds like underwater. Have you ever heard recordings of whales singing? It's amazing. And also in South Pacific, they use these shells. They blow through to make music. And I thought, how cool is that? It's, you know, a creature has lived in this thing and it's grown, it's natural. And then you just pick it up off the beach once that creature is finished with it, and you can make music with it. And also the log drums are instruments that come from that same place. So often it was to do with also if there was music from the Pacific Islands, I would try and find instruments or instruments that would sound like the instruments you might hear in the Pacific Islands or in Madagascar or what have you. And we learnt to play a few of those. And of course the bottle was trying to mimic the sound of that little bamboo flute in a different way.
What was your inspiration for these compositions?
Well, firstly, the natural world, the environment, and the many parts of that, whether it's air or the ocean or trees or little animals. There are great, and journeys. Because one thing that a lot of animals do is they travel also. They migrate and they move around their environment to find better places. So whales go on huge journeys from one end of the world to the other. And I often imagine, well, what do they see? What do they experience on their journey? We're never there. We talk about it, but we never actually go on that journey with them. And so I tried to imagine. So that's mostly where it comes from.